Part 1. The Disappearance, a night that changed everything. Night of May 14, 2008. Started like any other for Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old college student from Marshall, Minnesota. He had spent the evening with friends and after a fun time, was driving back home. Little did anyone know that this routine night would end in one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking missing person cases in modern American history. Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries to this day. Despite years of investigation, the events that led to his vanishing have never been fully explained, and the circumstances surrounding it continue to haunt both the authorities and his family. In this first part, we will explore the events that transpired that fateful night, the phone call that left a chilling mark, and an inexplicable absence of Brandon Swanson. Brandon's journey home. Brandon Swanson was a young man who had everything to look forward to. At 19, he was a sophomore at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College, majoring in wind turbine technology. He had spent the evening with friends in the nearby town of Canby, about 30 miles from his home in Marshall. After his time with friends, he decided to drive home, a route he was familiar with, through rural BACK or OADS. As he drove through the winding roads of Minnesota, Brandon encountered a problem. His car, a 1997 Pontiac Grand Am, became stuck in a ditch. It was a common enough occurrence in rural America, especially in areas where roads are poorly lit and travel can be hazardous after dark. For Brandon, this wasn't an unusual event, as he had driven through this area countless times. However, what should have been a minor inconvenience soon spiraled into a terrifying situation. The first call, a cry for help around 1 a.m., Brandon called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson. He told them that he had become stuck in the ditch and would need their help to get out. Brandon was calm and clear during the call, providing his location and asking his parents to come and pick him up. He assured them that he was okay and that they didn't need to worry. As they spoke, his parents quickly got dressed and prepared to go to his aid. However, Brandon, who was stuck somewhere along a rural gravel road near the town of Taunton, mentioned that he could see a nearby highway. He told his parents that he was going to try and walk toward it. This detail would prove to be important, as it was the last bit of information Brandon shared before the situation took a dark turn. The disappearance. A moment of silence. What happened next has baffled investigators and left his family grappling with uncertainty. As Brandon walked away from his car in the pitch-black night, he continued to talk to his parents on the phone. He described walking down a gravel road, and his parents, now just a few miles away, were driving to meet him. Suddenly, something happened that no one expected. During the call, at around 1:54 a.m., Brandon Swanson's voice shifted. He let out an exclamation, "Oh, shit," and the line went dead. His parents, in a panic, immediately tried calling him back, but there was no response. The phone went straight to voicemail. They waited and called again, but still, nothing. It was as if Brandon had vanished into thin air. In those final moments of their call, Brandon had been talking as if everything was fine, and then, without warning, he was gone. The abrupt silence that followed the "oh, shit" was terrifying for his parents. They immediately drove to the location he had described but found no sign of him. The search agents Brian and Annette Swanson arrived at the place where Brandon had indicated he would be, but there was no sign of him, his car, or any of his belongings. After searching the area for a while, they called the authorities at around 30 a.m. Local police officers responded to their call, and the search for Brandon Swanson began. Despite being so close to home and familiar with the area, Brandon Swanson had simply disappeared. The police launched an extensive search of the area, combing the roads, fields, and wooded areas around the location where Brandon had last spoken to his parents. They checked for any signs of an accident, any tire tracks, and anything that might explain his sudden disappearance. The first few hours of the search yielded nothing. There were no clues about where he could have gone or how he could have disappeared so quickly. The only thing that authorities had to go on was the brief and cryptic phone call and the last known location of Brandon's car. The police investigation began in earnest, but it quickly hit a dead end. As the hours turned into days, the authorities were left to examine all possible theories, but there was no clear lead. They suspected that Brandon might have wandered off the road after his car got stuck. The area he was in was remote, with dense forests and uneven terrain. But what didn't make sense was that he had been in communication with his parents up until the very moment of his disappearance. One possible explanation for Brandon's disappearance was that he had wandered into a nearby ravine or stream, but no traces of him were found. A search of the nearby rivers and ditches proved fruitless. There was no indication that he had met with foul play or had been in an accident. His cell phone record showed that the call with his parents had been cut off abruptly, but no further signals were detected after that. The search expanded. and volunteers joined the police in the hunt for any clues that might lead to Brandon. Rescue dogs were used to comb the area, but again, no signs of him appeared. As days passed without any major developments, the case grew colder. It seemed as though Brandon Swanson had vanished into thin air, and with each passing day, his family's hopes of finding him alive dwindled. Theories began to emerge as the investigation continued. Various theories about Brandon's disappearance started to emerge. Some speculated that he might have been disoriented after his car got stuck, wandering off into the wilderness and getting lost. Others suggested he may have had an accident, potentially falling into a nearby ravine or stream. However, no body was found to support these theories, and the lack of evidence left authorities with no clear answers. One theory that gained some traction was that Brandon had been abducted, although there were no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a kidnapping. The suddenness of his disappearance and the abrupt ending of his phone call led some to believe that foul play was involved. Yet, nothing could be proven, and the case of Brandon Swanson's disappearance remained a mystery. The last few words of his phone call, the desperate cry for help, and the chilling silence that followed became a haunting refrain that continued to echo in the minds of his family and everyone involved in the investigation. The missing piece, the phone call that made Brandon Swanson's disappearance even more perplexing, was the phone call itself. The nature of his last words, "Oh, shit," left many wondering what had happened in those final moments. Was Brandon reacting to a sudden danger? Was he frightened by something he encountered in the dark? Or had he realized something about his location that caused him to panic? What exactly happened between the time of the phone call and the silence that followed remains unanswered. Authorities and his family remain puzzled by the abrupt end to the call, and the truth of what happened that night continues to elude them. A family struggle for Brandon Swanson's parents. The uncertainty was unbearable. Brian and Annette Swanson spent countless sleepless nights wondering where their son had gone, how he could have disappeared without a trace, and why he hadn't returned home. Their anguish was compounded by the fact that the last time they heard their son's voice, it had been full of life and promise, and then, in an instant, he was gone. Despite the frustration and confusion, Brandon's family refused to give up hope. They worked tirelessly to raise awareness about his case, even going so far as to help pass legislation to address similar situations in the future. The pain of not knowing what happened to their son was unbearable, but the Swansons' fight for justice and closure continues to this day. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson is one of the most baffling and chilling missing person cases of the 21st century. While theories and speculation continue to swirl around his case, the mystery of what happened to him that night in 2008 remains unsolved. For now, the question still hangs in the air. What happened to Brandon Swanson on that fateful night, and why has he never been found? Part 2. The initial investigation for the eerie phone call on the night of May 14, 2008. When Brandon Swanson suddenly disappeared, the initial investigation was set into motion. However, the lack of clues and the absence of solid information quickly turned the case into one of the most perplexing missing person investigations in modern history. Despite numerous efforts to locate him, the investigation led to dead ends and left both authorities and his family with more questions than answers. The search began. Brandon's parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, realized they couldn't find him at the location he had described during the phone call. They immediately contacted the authorities. At around 30 a.m., they reported Brandon missing, and search teams were quickly dispatched. Local police arrived at the area Brandon mentioned and began their search. Despite being so close to home and in a rural area that Brandon knew well, the police found nothing. There were no signs of his car, no footprints, no debris, or anything that would indicate where Brandon had gone. His car was supposed to be stuck in a ditch along a rural road near Taunton, Minnesota, yet there was no trace of it. The authorities began to comb the surrounding area, including the forests and fields nearby, trying to piece together any clues that could explain Brandon's sudden disappearance. Rescue dogs were brought in, and the search expanded over several miles. But despite their extensive efforts, no traces of Brandon were found. Theories and challenges in the investigation quickly became tangled in uncertainty. Initially, authorities theorized that Brandon might have wandered away from his vehicle and gotten lost in the woods. However, there were no signs of him walking down the road, no footprints or tracks leading anywhere. And if Brandon had been walking toward the highway, as he mentioned in his last phone call, how could he have disappeared so completely? The fact that his last call ended abruptly with an exclamation, "Oh, shit," and then complete silence added an element of mystery. Investigators and his family both wondered what had caused Brandon to panic in those final moments. Could he have encountered something or someone in those dark, remote surroundings? Or was it simply the shock of being lost in an unfamiliar place? With no clear evidence of foul play and no visible injuries on the scene, authorities struggled to find any meaningful lead. The theory that Brandon had wandered into a nearby ravine or stream was explored, but nothing was found. The lack of physical evidence made it incredibly difficult to pinpoint exactly what happened in those final moments before his disappearance. The role of the phone call. Only of the most baffling aspects of Brandon's disappearance was the phone call he made to his parents. The phone call was the last connection between him and the outside world, and it raised more questions than answers. The conversation was calm and normal until the very end, when Brandon's voice suddenly changed and the line went dead. The fact that the call was abruptly cut off after Brandon's alarming outburst, "Oh shit," left everyone puzzled. Was Brandon startled by something? Or did he suddenly realize that something was wrong? Could he have been attacked? Was he involved in an accident, or did he simply get lost? Some investigators began to suggest that Brandon could have been involved in a car accident and was unable to continue speaking. But again, no evidence supported this theory. Furthermore, there was no sign of an accident in the area where Brandon said he was, and no crash debris or tire tracks leading away from his car were found. The lack of any obvious physical signs of injury and the fact that no one could locate Brandon in the area left the case in a standstill. Authorities had no clear evidence pointing to an accident, a crime, or even an escape attempt. Everything remained a mystery, increasing frustration and growing fears. Days passed with no solid leads. Frustration began to mount. Brandon's parents, devastated by the uncertainty, became desperate. They could not comprehend how their son could disappear without a trace. After talking to them on the phone, it was as though he had vanished into thin air. Authorities expanded their search further, covering a larger area in case Brandon had wandered off in a direction they hadn't anticipated. But the search was exhaustive and fruitless. Local residents were interviewed, and volunteers joined the search effort, but still, there was no sign of Brandon. The fact that Brandon had seemingly vanished without a trace left everyone involved with more questions than answers. What had really happened that night? Was he abducted? Did he wander into an area he couldn't escape from? Or was there a more complex explanation for his disappearance? The investigation shifts a dead end as weeks went by, and the investigation continued without any new leads. The case of Brandon Swanson's disappearance became more and more perplexing. With no clues from the scene and no physical evidence of foul play, authorities were forced to consider less likely possibilities. Could Brandon have gotten lost while walking to the highway, as he had told his parents? If he had fallen into a ravine or stream, why hadn't any trace of him been found? Could the police have missed something during their search? Or was it possible that Brandon's disappearance was somehow linked to a larger, more sinister event? The lack of definitive answers only intensified the sense of mystery in some ways. The investigation felt as though it were in a perpetual state of limbo. Even though there were countless hours of searching, no new clues emerged, and no one could explain why Brandon had disappeared under such unusual circumstances. The mystery of Brandon Swanson's disappearance remained unsolved for years, and the painful uncertainty of not knowing what happened that night continued to haunt his family. As investigators and loved ones struggled to piece together the puzzle, the case was left to rest in the realm of speculation and unanswered questions. Next steps, the investigation would continue, but with no new evidence or leads, the case seemed destined to remain a mystery. Would the truth of what happened to Brandon Swanson ever come to light? Or would his disappearance remain one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern times? In the following sections, we'll explore the various theories that emerged, the emotional toll on his family, and the legal changes prompted by his case, all of which kept the mystery of Brandon Swanson alive in the public consciousness. Part 3. Theories and Speculations. What really happened to Brandon Swanson? As the investigation into Brandon Swanson's disappearance stalled, the case became shrouded in mystery, with no concrete evidence to explain his sudden vanishing and the chilling end to his last phone call. Speculation grew. What could have caused such an abrupt and unexplained disappearance? In this section, we'll delve into the various theories and speculations that have emerged over the years regarding Brandon's fate. While none of these theories provide a definitive answer, each contributes to the complicated puzzle of what happened to him that fateful night. The possibility of an accident. First theory that came to mind for many investigators was that Brandon had suffered some sort of accident. His car had gotten stuck in a ditch, and it's possible that, in his attempts to get out or seek help, he could have lost his footing or wandered into a dangerous area. Given the terrain around Taunton, Minnesota, there are several natural hazards that could explain his disappearance. Could Brandon have fallen into a ravine or a deep creek near the road where he was stranded? The area surrounding Taunton is filled with dense woods, deep ditches, and small waterways that can have easily concealed an accident. The fact that Brandon mentioned seeing a highway and walking toward it suggests that he may have been trying to find his way out of the area, possibly heading into unfamiliar or unsafe terrain. One significant issue with this theory is that no body was found after extensive searching. The surrounding terrain was combed over multiple times, with search teams and volunteers covering miles of land. Rescue dogs were deployed, and even the rivers and streams were examined thoroughly. Yet no trace of Brandon was found. The absence of any physical signs, like blood or broken branches, left investigators scratching their heads. If Brandon had wandered off and died in an accident, why didn't they find anything? The theory of abduction, another theory that gained traction, particularly among those who followed the case closely, was the possibility that Brandon was abducted. The abrupt nature of his disappearance, especially after the phone call where he abruptly said, "Oh, shit," suggests a potential encounter with someone or something unexpected. This theory suggests that Brandon, while walking alone at night on a remote gravel road, could have encountered a person or group who meant him harm. Given the rural location, it is possible that someone with bad intentions could have been in the area, and Brandon's encounter with them escalated into a violent situation. This would explain the strange silence on the phone line right after his outburst. Was he suddenly attacked or grabbed before he could react? If Brandon had been taken by someone, it's possible that the authorities overlooked clues, or perhaps the abductor has disposed of any evidence. However, there are issues with this theory too. Despite multiple investigations and a thorough examination of the area, no physical evidence of an abduction such as a struggle, signs of forced entry into his car, or any witnesses was found. Additionally, no ransom demands were made or attempts to contact his family, which is often a telltale sign in abduction cases. The theory of suicide or self-harm, a darker theory that some have considered, is the possibility that Brandon's disappearance was self-inflicted. Some have suggested that after getting stuck in the ditch and possibly growing increasingly disoriented, Brandon may have become overwhelmed by the stress and isolation of the situation. This theory proposes that the "oh, shit" at the end of the phone call could have been Brandon realizing that he was in an unmanageable situation and ultimately choosing to walk away from everything. It's important to note that Brandon had no history of mental health problems or suicidal behavior, and this theory seems to contradict what little is known about his state of mind. Throughout the phone call, he had sounded calm and reassured, telling his parents he was okay and just needed help. His willingness to call his parents and his expressed intention to walk toward a highway both suggest he was thinking logically and trying to solve the problem at hand. Additionally, the complete lack of evidence supporting this theory, such as a note or any indication of intentional self-harm, makes it a less likely explanation. In most cases of self-inflicted disappearances, some trace or hint of the person's intention is usually left behind. But with Brandon, there was nothing to suggest this as a possibility. The possibility of a ditch or water incident, another possibility that was heavily considered early in the investigation, was that Brandon, after becoming stuck in the ditch, accidentally fell into one of the nearby bodies of water. The area surrounding Taunton is filled with creeks, streams, and ravines that could easily have swallowed someone who was disoriented or unaware of the dangers. Given that Brandon was walking alone at night, it's conceivable that he could have slipped or fallen into one of these waterways. With the area being so remote and no one around to help, he might have drowned or become incapacitated in some way, making it impossible for rescuers to find him. The theory suggests that Brandon may have wandered further than he realized while trying to reach a more visible landmark, such as the highway. If he stumbled into a creek or ravine, the search teams could have missed it, especially if he had been swept away by the current. This theory, though plausible, still doesn't explain the lack of any evidence of such an incident. There were no signs of Brandon's body being recovered from any water sources, and the search of the local rivers yielded nothing of importance. The ghost theory, an unsolvable mystery, one of the most compelling, though eerie, theories that circulates in connection with Brandon's disappearance is the idea of paranormal or supernatural involvement. The rural Minnesota setting, combined with the bizarre circumstances surrounding his last phone call, has led some to speculate about more unusual explanations. Some people believe that Brandon may have encountered something inexplicable during his walk, perhaps something supernatural or otherworldly that caused him to disappear. This theory is, of course, highly speculative and lacks any evidence to back it up, but it reflects the depth of the mystery and the emotional toll it has had on those searching for answers. It's important to note that, while some aspects of the case are strange and unusual, there is no definitive proof to support this or any paranormal theories. The majority of the case, from a factual standpoint, remains grounded in potential natural causes or criminal activity, but the mysterious circumstances keep the door open to all possibilities. Ongoing mysteries. Despite the many theories and efforts by authorities, Brandon's disappearance remains unsolved. No one can say for certain what happened during those final moments of his phone call, or why he vanished into thin air. Each of the theories above provides a possible explanation, but without hard evidence. none of them can be definitively proven. What makes the case even more puzzling is that Brandon Swanson is not the only person to have gone missing under similarly bizarre circumstances in rural areas. His case raises important questions about the safety of rural roads, the potential dangers of isolation, and the ever-present mystery of what truly happens when a person goes missing without a trace. Part 4. The legal impact in Brandon's law. A family's fight for justice as the months turned into years. With no answers regarding the disappearance of their son, Brian and Annette Swanson found themselves not only grappling with the uncertainty of what happened to Brandon, but also fighting to ensure that future cases of missing persons would be handled differently. The frustration of not having a clear explanation or resolution for their son's case led them to take action, hoping that the system could be changed to prevent such heartache for other families. The Swansons fight for immediate action. After weeks of silence and confusion surrounding Brandon's disappearance, the Swanson family began to question the way the case was being handled. Although the authorities had responded to the initial call and conducted searches, they were troubled by the slow pace of the investigation. They felt that the situation warranted more immediate and direct action from the police, particularly given the unusual and unexplained nature of Brandon's case. In the early stages of the investigation, there were delays in initiating a full-scale search, and the Swansons believed this contributed to the difficulty in finding Brandon. They were frustrated by the lack of urgency in the police's response, and by the fact that there was no clear protocol in place to address missing persons in rural areas, where time was of the essence. At the time, police departments were not legally required to immediately investigate cases of missing adults, and families often had to wait a certain period before authorities could officially act. This waiting period proved to be a critical problem for the Swansons and others in similar situations. The passage of Brandon's law motivated by the lack of immediate action in their son's case, Brian and Annette Swanson began advocating for a change in how law enforcement handled missing persons cases. Their persistence and determination led to the creation of Brandon's law, which was passed in 2009. Brandon's law mandated that law enforcement agencies must begin investigating any reports of missing persons immediately, regardless of the person's age. Prior to this law, authorities often delayed investigations for missing adults, assuming that they may have simply left voluntarily or were not in immediate danger. This delay often resulted in wasted time, and in some cases, it made finding the missing person more difficult. The law also emphasized the importance of using more advanced technology in searches, such as tracking devices, GPS data, and quicker coordination between local, state, and federal authorities to maximize search efforts. The law's impact on future case. Brandon's law was a groundbreaking piece of legislation in the context of missing persons cases, as it forced a reevaluation of the priorities and procedures law enforcement agencies used when investigating disappearances. For Brian and Annette Swanson, the passing of the law was a bittersweet victory, as it didn't bring their son back, but it did provide hope that other families would not have to endure the same frustrations and delays they faced. In the years following the passing of Brandon's law, several high-profile cases of missing persons have seen quicker responses from law enforcement, allowing for a more efficient search and investigation. While the law does not guarantee that every missing person case will be solved, it ensures that authorities take immediate action rather than waiting and assuming. Though Brandon's case remains unsolved, his family's tireless efforts led to a tangible change in the legal system, ensuring that others would not face the same heartbreak due to unnecessary delays in investigations. Raising awareness about the dangers of rural roads and disappearance are an important aspect of the Swanson family's advocacy was the broader issue of rural disappearances. Brandon's case highlighted the dangers of being alone in isolated, rural areas at night, and how difficult it is to trace and locate people in such environments. Brian and Annette Swanson spoke openly about the risks associated with rural roads and the unique challenges that law enforcement and search teams face when someone goes missing in remote areas. In addition to pushing for legal changes, the Swansons worked to raise awareness about the plight of individuals in similar situations, particularly young people who might find themselves stranded or lost in isolated regions. They emphasized the importance of letting loved ones know where you are at all times, especially when traveling in unfamiliar or remote areas, and how important it is for authorities to have immediate access to critical information in such emergencies. Their efforts help shed light on a hidden issue: how isolated rural communities sometimes lack the resources and immediate response systems needed to locate missing individuals quickly. Public reaction and the continuing legacy of Brandon's disappearance and the subsequent advocacy by his family brought national attention to the issue of missing persons, particularly in rural areas. The media coverage surrounding the case and the Swanson family's push for change helped educate the public on the importance of taking swift action when someone goes missing. Many people, especially in rural communities, resonated with the Swansons' plight. Brandon was just a young man trying to get home after a night out with friends, and his story could have been anyone's. The case highlighted how a seemingly minor incident, a car stuck in a ditch, could escalate into something far more serious when the proper steps weren't taken quickly enough. While the passage of Brandon's law was a victory for the Swanson family, it didn't stop them from continuing their search for answers. The question of what truly happened to Brandon that night still lingers, and his parents continue to push for more resources and better protocols to help solve cases like their sons. In the years since Brandon's disappearance, his case has served as a cautionary tale. It emphasizes the critical importance of prompt action when a person goes missing, and how failure to do so can result in unnecessary loss of life or the inability to recover someone before it's too late. A continued search for closure despite the legal reforms and the awareness raised by Brandon's case. The fundamental question of what happened to him that night in 2008 remains unanswered. His family still holds onto the hope that one day they will learn the truth about his disappearance. Every year, the Swanson family continues to honor Brandon's memory and raise awareness about the dangers faced by those who go missing in rural or isolated settings. Their ongoing fight for justice and closure is fueled by love and a commitment to ensuring that no other family has to endure what they did. While Brandon's loss stands as a legacy of their efforts, the quest for answers continues to haunt the Swansons. Will the truth about Brandon Swanson's disappearance ever come to light? Or will his case remain one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern times? Part 5. The Legacy of Brandon Swanson, a story of unanswered questions and ongoing hope. A decade after Brandon Swanson's disappearance, the case remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in modern American history. While many aspects of the investigation have faded from the public eye, the emotional toll on his family, the continuing search for answers, and the broader impact of the case continue to shape how missing persons cases are handled today. The legacy of Brandon's disappearance is not just about the search for truth. It's about the hope, advocacy, and legal reforms that his family fought for in the wake of the tragedy. A family's enduring heart-shattering pain of not knowing what happened to their son has never left Brian and Annette Swanson. While they found solace in the passage of Brandon's law, the legal change that mandates immediate investigation in missing persons cases, it doesn't change the fact that Brandon is still gone and his fate remains unknown. The law has brought hope to countless families who face the same uncertainty, but it also serves as a painful reminder of the limitations of legal reform. When it comes to solving individual cases, Brian and Annette have continued to keep their son's memory alive, participating in media interviews, raising awareness about the dangers of rural roads, and speaking at events dedicated to missing persons. Each year, they commemorate Brandon, keeping his name in the public consciousness, hoping that one day, someone will come forward with information that could bring closure. Though they have found strength in advocacy and activism, the pain of not knowing has never fully healed. Every day, the Swansons face the reality that they may never know the truth about what happened to their son, a reality that is shared by many families of missing persons. The continued search for answers despite the passage of time and the legal changes that were brought about by their efforts. The Swansons remain committed to finding answers about what happened to Brandon. While there are fewer search efforts than in the early days following his disappearance, the family continues to work with law enforcement, cold case investigators, and private investigators who specialize in missing persons cases. The search for Brandon has become a personal mission for his parents, who hope that one day they will get the answers they so desperately need, whether that means finding his body or uncovering new evidence that brings the case back into the public eye. They have vowed never to give up. Brandon's case has also inspired others to take a closer look at rural disappearances and missing persons cases, especially in remote areas. The legacy of Brandon's case has pushed authorities and advocacy groups to continue pushing for improvements in the ways missing persons cases are handled, and for more resources to be dedicated to solving them. Brandon's impact on law enforcement and society. Brandon's disappearance and the subsequent passage of Brandon's law had a lasting impact on how missing persons cases are investigated across the United States. Law enforcement agencies are now required to act swiftly when someone is reported missing, regardless of their age. This change in protocol has led to faster and more efficient searches for missing individuals, potentially saving lives and bringing families the closure they deserve. In addition to the changes in law enforcement practices, Brandon's case has brought attention to the vulnerabilities faced by individuals in rural areas, particularly when traveling alone at night. The case has sparked conversations about road safety, emergency preparedness, and the need for better systems in place to track and locate individuals in rural and remote areas. Brandon's disappearance also raised awareness about the emotional toll missing persons cases take on families, and the lack of immediate support systems available to those left behind. Organizations that support families of missing persons have used Brandon's case as a rallying point for greater advocacy, pushing for more comprehensive support and resources for families during the emotional and often frustrating journey of finding answers, the hope for closure. While the details surrounding Brandon Swanson's disappearance may never be fully understood, the Swanson family continues to hold on to hope. They hope that one day, new evidence will surface, a witness will come forward, or a breakthrough in the case will provide the closure they have longed for. Brandon's legacy isn't just about the tragedy that befell him, but also about the resilience of his family. Despite the unanswered questions and the enduring pain, Brian and Annette have found strength in their efforts to change the way missing persons cases are handled, and in doing so, they've helped countless other families who face similar heartache. Their journey continues as they push for answers and never give up hope that the truth will eventually come to light. Even in the face of adversity, the Swanson family remains determined, a testament to the power of love, persistence, and the unyielding hope that one day, the mystery of Brandon's disappearance will be solved. Thank you for watching and following the mysterious case of Brandon Swanson. His disappearance has touched many hearts, and the ongoing fight for justice continues to inspire us all. If you have any information regarding Brandon's case or any thoughts about the theories we've discussed, please feel free to share them in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Room 57 for more true crime stories and unsolved mysteries. By subscribing, you'll stay up to date on the latest in-depth investigations and the stories that keep us all questioning the unknown. Let's continue the conversation about missing persons and the importance of quick action in these cases. What do you think happened to Brandon Swanson? Do you believe there are unanswered questions still lurking in this case? Share your thoughts. And remember, every voice counts in the search for truth. Thank you for your support, and stay tuned for more chilling stories from Room 57. Until next time, stay vigilant, keep asking questions, and never stop searching for answers.